Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening. We're coming on 7 o'clock, so I'd like to get started. I'll just check with our staff that all online IT systems are a go. Okay, excellent. Welcome, everyone. If you please make your way to a seat, that would be great. Okay. Excellent. So I'll now call tonight's regular meeting of council to order. I do wish to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the territories of the Souq and Sianu nations, and we wish to acknowledge and thank them for their stewardship of the lands and waters that continues to this day. So members of council, I'll turn your attention to item 5, which is approval of tonight's meeting agenda. And if just before I look for a mover, there's just a comment that I would like to make on council procedure. So council is guided in the way it conducts meeting by both its procedural bylaw, council procedural bylaw, Robert's rules, and the community charter. So within these documents, any bylaw that is before council for first and second reading will not be open for public commentary. So if you're here to speak on a bylaw that is before us for first or second reading, there is no opportunity for public input tonight. That would occur at the public hearing. So if you're here for the OCP, council met at committee of the whole, where we did receive information. So any items that you do wish to speak about, you could provide comments in writing, all of which will form part of the public hearing package, which council can consider at a later date. But council is sitting now, members of council may, if they so wish, when we get to a particular item, may then make a motion where they may want to direct it to a committee of the whole, which would allow for public input. So I'll leave that to members of council to consider. But for members of the public that wish to speak on the official community plan, at this point, it is before us in a bylaw form for first reading, in which case public input on that would be reserved for the open house and the public hearing, both of which already scheduled. Ms. Machada, our corporate officer, I'll just ask that if you could just confirm that that is in keeping with our procedural bylaw.
The only
except for the development variance permit that has its own designated public input session tonight.
Yes, that's correct. But the only thing I would perhaps suggest is that council cannot at this point direct it back to a committee of the whole. We had our committee of the whole before first reading. So I suppose if council did not give it first reading tonight, it could go back to committee of the whole, but after it's had first reading, it would then proceed to the public hearing.
Okay, and then any items received by members of the public, council will now begin forwarding all of those so that staff have them. Any members of the public that send emails to a member of council or to council has just been with council up until that point. It needs to go into the public record. We're starting to forward them to our info@souq.ca email. And that way everything will line up in the correspondence block and it will all form part of the public hearing package. Is that clear for everybody sitting here? Okay, so on that note, I'd like to ask for approval of tonight's agenda as circulated, please. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Logans. Any questions from members of council? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. A few housekeeping points that I'd also like to make are public washrooms on this level are currently not operational. They're being renovated. So should you wish to find or need a water closet, washroom facility, please reach out to one of our staff and they will escort you down to another floor and to an accessible washroom. Members of council, I'll make an effort for a health break at about 8:20. If you can remind me if I forget, because I usually do, that would be great. And just procedurally for when members of council call out a point of order. So there's just a correction that I'd like to make there. A member of council can at any time, if they feel the meeting is not being conducted in accordance with the rules outlined, can call out a point of order. At that time, I will listen to the member and make a ruling as chair. My ruling as chair is final. Should you disagree, then you would need to call to sustain the chair and we would go to a vote, of which I am also as chair able to vote. And then we would carry on. If you disagree with that ruling, council can then vote and carry on. So the back and forth that we've kind of been doing isn't actually procedurally correct. So I stand corrected and we'll move on. Okay, thank you for that, everybody. So that brings us to our first item, which is our first public and statutory hearings. 6.1 is a development variance permit for 5497 Sooke Road. So turn that over to staff, please. No, we'll go to staff first. Thank you. And then we'll call for members of the public. I'm just getting staff to load the PowerPoint. Thank you.
Thank you. We've received a development variance permit for the property located at 5497 Sooke Road to facilitate the construction of a new detached small suite using the existing foundation of an accessory building and to bring the existing single-family dwelling into compliance with the zoning bylaw. The applicants requested to vary section 104.7 of the zoning bylaw from 3 meters to 0.82 meters for the eastern side lot line and from 3 meters to 0.54 meters for the western side lot line. Located on Sooke Road in the Casinos neighborhood between the Esso gas station and the Stickleback Eatery, the subject property is relatively flat with a gradual sloping driveway entrance and is approximately 1,857 square meters in size. Subject property is currently zoned RU4 under the zoning bylaw and is designated gateway residential in the current official community plan. Applicants proposing to construct a new detached small suite using the existing foundation from the accessory building currently on the property. Applicant will be required to apply for a building permit with the Building Safety Division to authorize the proposed construction. Existing single-family dwelling with an attached deck is currently legal non-conforming as to its siting. The applicant is requesting to bring the single-family dwelling with the attached deck into compliance with the zoning bylaw. On the screen here is a detailed site plan from a land surveyor revealing that the existing single-family dwelling encroaches into the required side lot line. And also the attached deck further extends closer to that westerly side lot line. Accessory building also encroaches into the east side lot line and are the two variances before us tonight. Denial of the variance request to construct a new detached small suite on the existing foundation of the accessory building would require removal of the existing foundation and siting it in accordance with the 3 meter lot line setback requirement as per the RU4 zone. There's no identified steep slope hazards or environmentally sensitive areas on the subject property. Impacts to views and enjoyment of adjacent properties are not anticipated to be affected. Staff support issuance of the development variance permit for the two side lot line setbacks. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. First turn to members of council for any questions of staff on the report. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, thank you. Through you to Mr. Powell. Can you tell me when these structures were built originally? And give me a little history on that.
I don't have those specific dates just on my screen.
It
here.
predates incorporation, I take it.
Correct.
Yeah. Were any comments received from the near neighbors on Croydon Place?
I didn't have any comments from the file manager that were provided regarding those concerns to the side lot lines.
And notification was served to all those within, what, 100 meters or something?
Yes, as per the Local Government Act.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions, members of council? Okay, so I'll now turn to members of the public. So this is a development variance permit for 5497 Sooke Road. So this public input is for this variance specifically. So any member of the public that would like to comment, it would be to comment on this particular item only. So gentleman in the first row. You're the homeowner, okay. Nothing. Okay, so 1945 was the answer from when the home. Okay, you might need to come, maybe just come forward and introduce yourself since we're already in this conversation. If you could just briefly just give us your name.
My name is Kevin. I'm the homeowner since 2008.
Okay, Kevin
Malice. Sorry.
Kevin Malice.
I just assumed you knew my last name.
Actually, I
But
don't. But welcome, Mr. Malice. Thank you.
Yeah.
1947, you said. 95.
Well, this is the
45.
original home, was built in 1945. And then at some point in time, they decided to block up the area. I think it was originally a farm of some kind. And so I have a 1945 home and a 1982 home put together. And that's why the home is so close to the property line. That's how I came to. So I just want to bring it up to code.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add?
No. thank you.
Okay, all right. You may take
Yeah.
a seat. Thank you. Other members of the public that would like to comment on these variances? Call for a second time. Anyone? Anyone at all? This is the last call on 5497 Sooke Road. Last and final time. Okay. So on that note, thank you for attending tonight. And council, the recommendation tonight is that council authorize the issuance of development variance permit PLN 01642 for 5497 Sooke Road to reduce the required lot line setbacks from 3 meters to 0.82 meters for the eastern side lot line and from 3 meters to 0.54 meters for the western side lot line. Moved by Councillor Logans, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Any comments, Councillor Logans? No. Councillor Lajeunesse? No. Anyone from anyone else? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And you're welcome to leave, or you could stay for the rest of the meeting. We like having members of the public in the gallery, but I'll leave that up to you. Okay, thank you. Okay, so next up is item 7, adoption of meeting minutes. Here is our March 28th regular meeting minutes of council for adoption. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Logans. Any questions, corrections? None? All right, all those in favor of adoption? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 8, report of the Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do not have a presentation prepared for council this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McInnes. That brings us to our public question and comment period. So here's where I'll invite members of the public forward. So this will be for items 10 and 11. 12s are bylaw, and number 13, 14, well, 15 is a verbal update. You can always speak on adjournment as well. So on that note, I'll invite any members of the public that wish to address council tonight on those items.
Ellen Norris, 5526 Sooke Road. I just wanted to comment on the OCP because the regional context statement
So
is
Mrs.
missing.
Lawyers, here's.
It's not in.
Okay, so this is where we are here in a bylaw section. And so there is no public comment when a bylaw is at first reading. It needs to wait for the public hearing because we've already sat through a committee of the whole.
Okay.
That is our procedural bylaw and I need to.
Right,
respect
I
it.
understand that, but it's not complete. That's just what I was
Okay,
saying. It's
so
not complete.
What I'll
Okay,
request then is if you wish to email council and info, we can forward that on and we can get that information. back to
okay.
you.
And I have another couple comments. There
Okay.
were other letters that were sent to council and they're not in the agenda package in regard to the OCP. I just want to make note of that.
So I'll
Also,
just to reply back that any emails that were sent just to council@souq.ca, it means that we need to still forward them over to info. The emails for council is for council's privilege. So that's why those emails have not come into the staff. Don't follow our council email. It's council's email.
I understand if a council gets information or letters from the public, that it's open to the public, because everything that goes to council is also public.
Yes, so we'll forward those through to our corporate staff so they can build up the public hearing package. If you haven't seen them on the consent agenda, it's because we still need to do that. We were bombarded and we're just a little bit behind.
Okay. Another point is that the public input for the OCP at the meeting before this last one, we were told that there'd be a public open meeting. So
Yes,
so that, I think a lot of people were waiting for that.
we have a
And-
public open house scheduled.
Yes. but it's-
And that is being set for, remind me of the date,
May 7th.
May the 7th. There is a public open house scheduled on the official community plan for May the 7th from 12 to 4 in the dining room of the community hall, which
Right.
is located on Shields Road. The upstairs was booked.
Right. So after the public
That is
hearing,
an open house, and then should council move to third reading and then direct staff to schedule a public hearing, then there will be a full public hearing on the OCP. And that's where everyone can come forward and speak again to council.
right. My question is, what's the point of the open house if it's not going to be put into the OCP?
Because that's where council would requested a informal way to engage with the community and talk about some things in particular with the plan. So that is what we have developed and set aside for that.
Right, before it was
Before we
decided to
get
go for
into a
public hearing.
formal session of a public hearing, we
Right.
wanted to have a more informal opportunity to meet with members of the
Right.
public because COVID restricted us from meeting in front of people.
Right, right. But the thought was, or it looked like there'd be a public open house before there was a first reading. So I think that was a little disappointing. I was disappointed in that. Like,
We had the committee of the whole on whatever
Last
date
week,
that was. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, anyway, continue, Ms. Lewis.
I have some other comments. Do I?
Not for the OCP. I'm
Not for
not
the
going to
OCP.
hear anything further on the OCP because I've gone through procedurally what we have outlined for that. But if there's items that you wish to address us on item
Yep.
10,
there is-
11.
There is,
Okay, go
on
ahead,
the Sooke
please.
Region Community Health Network Lot A proposal. So does that leave me 12 seconds or do I come back?
So we'll restart the timer on items that you can speak to. Be glad to do that.
Okay. So for the Lot A for the seniors, as that is a senior and youth component. And I didn't know that it was supposed to also be for housing. First, it says a Souq Senior Center. Then later on, we see housing for 75 homes. But this is supposed to be for housing. If it's going to be for housing, is it for youth and seniors? And perhaps this should be looked at again, because I think things have changed as far as needs in the community. And I think that council should hold off on this and do a needs assessment, what's needed in the community. We do need addiction center, mental health center. And I think things have changed a lot. So we need to be looking at that, I believe. Seniors are mostly homed already, but we have a lot of people that are homeless that are not seniors as well. So I think we need to look at that again before we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Okay, other members of the public here tonight? Okay, can you just turn on the microphone for the folks viewing at home? Thank
How's
you.
that? Is that
That's
all right?
perfect, yes.
Okay. Your worship, council members, staff. Is there public participation right now or?
There
it only
is-
Speaking to the bylaws.
Not on the bylaws because they will have their own public
Right.
input session. So on other items,
Okay.
yes. So I just need your name, please, and
Yeah,
let us
Dave
know where you live.
Saunders.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Saunders.
Representing Saunders Family Foundation and our property at Whiffen Spit Road. Am I allowed to hand out anything?
You could pass it to our corporate officer, then they'll distribute it to us afterwards. But
Awesome.
go ahead and speak first and then
Sure. So the Saunders family has been around for a long time, born and raised in the West Shore and Sooke Incorporated and the Chosen Incorporated and Colwood Incorporated and Langford Incorporated. And we grew up, and Duncan, that's right. So we grew up in the West Shore and we know a lot about the West Shore, and we grew up as, and I'm honest about this, we grew up as a poor family, collecting pop bottles off the side of the road to make a living, hunting, fishing, you name it. So we worked hard as a family and we started the Saunders Family Foundation, of which we support communities. And I just wanted to bring forward that I'm working currently right now through our foundation on 4 different areas that are involving the West Shore and in particular Souq. So I just wanted to bring you up to speed. I have talked to Councillor Logans and Councillor McMath, and they've been instrumental in some of the initiatives that we're working on. So right now I'm working on a new initiative. It's with helping with food security for the Ukrainian refugees that will be arriving. And then I'm working on an arborist training pilot project with the school district and Camosun College. It's been very successful because in our trade, we're finding it hard to find employees. I'm also working a complex care for seniors for the West Shore. Been working on that for a while now. Am I out of time?
no, it's more, which agenda item are you speaking to?
Well, and this is what I asked.
Okay.
It's odd that there's no public participation at a council meeting. Sorry.
It's specific to the items on the
And
agenda,
that's what I wondered.
Yes.
So there is no public participation at a council meeting? or-
not an open forum, no.
Wow. Okay.
Never had one in the time that I've served.
Okay.
So, but what you could do actually, if we could receive that, we'd like to invite you back and hear more, then you'd be on the agenda and we can actually have more of a discussion about what you're saying. You're not here specifically for an agenda item.
Okay. I apologize.
That's fine. Or
It's odd, to be
there
quite
is
honest.
also the delegation process where then you're actually on the agenda. There's a set 5-minute time period. Council can extend that by another 5. And then that way all your information, because otherwise only those of us that read and receive this see this, whereas the public has no idea what when someone just comes in and talks about something, if it's not on the agenda, then it's not transparent to everyone else that's reading the agenda or viewing from home.
Well, I apologize. It's
That's
different in
okay.
other municipalities, former
It's-
councillor, former mayor, so it's odd to
Great
me.
to see you.
but
Okay, thank
good
you
to see
very much.
everybody, and look forward to touching base on some
Okay.
projects and also the tree bylaw. as well.
Sure, if you
Thank you
could
very much.
hand those to our corporate officer, we'd love to receive one. Okay, thank you. Okay, other members of the public here tonight? We'll call for a second and final time. Second and final time. Okay, so we'll move on then to our consent agenda, which is item 10. And that would be that items 10.1 be adopted by general consent. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. So if any folks would like to leave, maybe we'll just pause so that,
And I need to declare a conflict of interest on the next one, so just a heads up there.
okay, where will you be?
I don't know. I guess in the kitchen.
Is the kitchen open? Okay. Okay, for folks that are leaving, those you're staying, those are leaving, just so. Okay, we'll just allow for a couple of minutes. Okay, anyone else leaving? Okay, thank you. We voted on the consent agenda. Yeah. No. For those remaining, this procedural bylaw has gone through a public process several times over. You're more than willing to look at any other jurisdiction on the South Island, most in BC, and you'll find our rules are consistent with other practices elsewhere. This isn't new and unique to Sooke. It's fairly standard, so we stay on track and do the business of the municipality that we're all here for. Okay, so we're moving on to item 11, Councillor Logans.
I'll declare a conflict of interest for this item as my mother is the executive director of the Sooke Family Resource Society.
Councillor Logan's declared a conflict, so I'll turn, she's exited, over to staff, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing really further to add. This is just a follow-up from Council's desire for Sooke the District of Sooke to enter into a service agreement with Sooke Family Resource Society. And so staff worked with the representatives from the organization and came up with the service agreement attached to the report. So council at the time requested that this come back in front of council just to confirm that they were that the deliverables were what you were hoping for in the service agreement. So that's all this is for, is just seeking your endorsement to enter into the service agreement.
Very good. Thank you very much, staff. Questions from members of council? Go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
I just had a couple of questions. The first, well, they're related. And mostly, as I think we all know, the funding for this particular service agreement, at least at this point in time, is coming from COVID funding, I believe. Yes? Good.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so this really has to do with the nature of the programs that are being funded and what happens when the COVID funding elapses. So the services are dealing with mental health. They're unlikely to become unnecessary. And I certainly hope that the Family Resource Society won't have to cut back on service at that point in time. So I'm curious about what can be done about that and whether or not we can be, what can we do about that? The follow-up question is with regards to service agreements in general, where the services might actually be providing, and recently we had the coordination, volunteer coordination type of thing, but this falls into the same category in some ways. When our staff doesn't have necessarily the expertise to provide the services, and certainly mental health would follow through, but we want to provide those services. Has there ever been, is it possible to consider non-market funding, which is right now allotted for increasing staff, to provide services that might be better provided through community service agreements?
Okay, so I'll answer this first and then I'll hand it over to Ms. Gray. So you may recall this was an item that staff had raised, just what if when the funds run out. And certainly I think that's still a very valid perspective. It's the same with our funding for the Sooke Shelter Society, for example. There was a considerable provincial grant that we are administering for the Sooke shelter. So part of it is twofold, is that the organization finds a way to sustain itself through this time. So that's part of it. The second one that a future council would have to consider is this, and certainly what you have said would be an option available to council, or is it now that we've taken on another download that really belongs to the province or the federal government, which is more, I think, is what we should be advocating for, is this really the place where local government is here to pick up the pieces? We did, because it was necessary with COVID and the impact that the pandemic is having on our residents. However, I think that's where it's the ongoing pieces with the province, like, look, local government is carrying all of this and this really doesn't belong here. And so we need to find another way to do that. So there's no easy answer at this point. I think the concern would be then, well, how long would that work where they're reliant? It's really subject to council's will of the day, and that's not sustainable for any organization in Sooke. So Ms. Gray, is there anything further?
Through your worship, I think you covered the main speaking points. Was there is potentially, if counseling services are a service that the district wants to provide, not the province, then it also raises the question that came up with the original report, was, is this the only organization that could provide that counseling? So probably a more fulsome procurement process may have to happen. If this is something council's interested in the district providing the service, then a more broad intake maybe should be presented, so other organizations within the community might have an opportunity to say, we can provide this, we can provide that. It just, this was a unique one-off situation occurring at the time, which is why COVID funds were being recommended. And then with the full intention of coming back to council with the 2-year agreement after, before that expires, and seeking further direction from council on what they would like to do with further service agreements, or further expanding the scope, or to be continued.
Other questions from members of council? Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, through you to Ms. Gray. I note in the staff report, you've cited the services that the Sooke Family Resource Society delivers to the District of Sooke. However, in Schedule A, there are very specific services provided pursuant to this agreement. So I just want to be clear that it's under Schedule A, Item 2 is what we are funding specifically.
Correct. Yes, Schedule A is where we're trying to be better at fleshing out more details on that. So the reports back to council that come back will have specific information based on these specific deliverables in Schedule A.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so the recommendation is that council authorize the Chief Administrative Officer, Corporate Officer to execute the Community Service Agreement with Sooke Family Resource Society. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, and that's unanimous. Thank you. If we could have Councillor Logans return to the room. Just give a knock. Okay, next up is 11.2, Lot A, Elders Project Funding Request.
Thank you, Your Worship. My report in the council agenda has some history on this, but the rationale for the request in front of council this evening is that the Sooke Region's Community Health Network has requested that council consider another $100,000 draw from the seniors/youth fund for them to do some work through a grant with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So the request would improve the building design to meet a net zero efficiency target. Will improve the life cycle operating costs of the building, and will position the project to leverage additional grants through the Green Municipal Fund. BC Housing has indicated that this work would position this project well for the next call when BC Housing puts out their next call as well. And this will leave approximately $85,000 in the fund as it is now. So council has provided $50,000 in funding. Surgeon has done a wonderful job of leveraging that money to come up with their design. They have a great design team. As you know, council has amended the memorandum of understanding that we have with the Sooke Region's Community Health Network. We're holding that land for them until the next call from BC Housing, which is expected to be sometime within the next 12 to 18 months. So the recommendation is that council approve an additional draw of $100,000 from the Youth Seniors Center Reserve Fund established by bylaws number 717 as requested by the Sooke Region Communities Health Network. And happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Councillor Logans.
Yes, through you to staff, I do have a question because I thought that we did something like this similarly in a previous year where we didn't do a draw necessarily of the funds, but we did agree in principle so that they could apply for grants and put that number in the budget and say Sooke, District of Sooke, and list the amount that they requested in order to draw matching funds. And then that way, if the grant was accepted, they could move ahead with that and we would continue with the funds in principle. But if it wasn't, then we still have that for the next time. So I thought that we kind of had already agreed to do that for a previous grant. And I'm just wondering if we need to do that again for this one. Because it could be the case that we don't receive this, right? But hopefully we do. But any amount of funds that's matching or that we put forward in principle I imagine since we had done that previously, they'd be able to use that amount again for this upcoming grant. Unless it was grant specific last time.
I think the funding draw before though was specific for them to be able to do the necessary designs and so forth for the grant intake. And then we weren't successful in that round, got further feedback on what we could do. And that's sort of what's brought us to today, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct,
It's
Mr.?
my understanding, yes.
Yeah.
The remainder of the fund is there to complete the design work for the next intake from BC Housing. This will enhance the design. And speaking with Search and their design team, they think that the $85,000 that would remain in the fund would be enough to complete the design and make the next application.
So for clarity, then this would only be for design.
Yes, so the bylaw is pretty specific on what the fund can be used for. This work is part of the capital project.
Okay, for some reason I was thinking it had to do with an application, like matching. Am I reading this wrong? Matching funds for the application?
It is. So this is a matching grant through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So your comment about this being provisional upon that grant being accepted, that's exactly the case. If that grant is not successful, this money would not be forwarded to the Sooke Region's Community Health Network.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I just still not clear, District of Sooke Senior Youth Center Reserve Fund Bylaw 717. I mean, it's pretty clear this is for a youth and a seniors drop-in center, not housing. And the grants are going after is affordable housing. And so I just don't think it's appropriate to take the money out of this fund. And this was specifically set up for my understanding years ago was sort of a drop-in center for youth. And for some reason, it's now turned into a housing project with the possibility of having some portion of it but still would have to be funded separately. My understanding from BC Housing, when they had their original design, that there would have to be some other money put in for the youth center and the drop-in center. Am I on mark there? Maybe through your worship to staff?
So BC Housing does allow for amenity space. It's not a large space, but it would be part of the project that would be funded by BC Housing. So it's not just the 74 housing units. It does include funding for the community center portion as well.
So there were two grant applications that they had applied for. One was for the drop-in center, and then a separate one was for the elders
Housing.
complex, the housing component. We were not successful in either of those grant applications. And so this is where we're trying a different way to try to get the funding.
But what is this funding? What's the end result of this funding? Is it for housing or is it for a youth center? I mean, I'm getting a little confused here. I mean, to me, it's this was designed when it was first set up. We had 320,000 or something like that. 250 originally. I'm sorry, I stand corrected then. And now we're going to use another 100,000 of it for affordable housing for seniors. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I just don't think that that's what this money was geared for. So I'm not inclined to agree with taking the money from this fund.
Mr. McInnes?
So the energy efficiency would be for the entire complex, for both the senior center and for the housing component.
And then the senior center would also be programmed for the youth. So they commissioned a study to get that input into what the youth were looking for as part of the seniors drop-in center. And so there's sort of the two components with the housing above.
So my understanding is the original goal is to get the 70 units of housing. And the offshoot of that is there will be a room there that the seniors could use as a drop-in center?
It started the other way around, actually, with a seniors drop-in center first. And then we identified that on Lot A, but through the charrette process, it was identified of having greater density and not just a single story building on that site. So given our housing needs assessment that was recently done, as well as the one prior, it still identifies a need for well below rental housing for seniors in our community, which is still a very current need that is outstanding. And the BC housing projects that are currently underway are not serving that demographic. So that's where there is still this missing piece, but it started as a seniors and youth center. And now with the density, it's sort of added to that. So it's kind of like, no, actually the senior center was always the first priority. And this has come
Well,
out
that's where
afterwards.
that's where
Yeah.
I'm having my problem, Your Worship, is that the senior center, and I understand that priority and I understand the need for seniors housing, but these grants that we're going for are for housing and not for a seniors drop-in center. I know that it looks like somewhere down the line, if BC housing does come through after these two things come through, but is there any guarantee that the youth would be able to use it? I mean, it's going to be, that drop-in center is for the residents of the building. Is it open to the public?
It's open to the public. It's not meant to be
I
a
see.
amenity just for
Yeah,
the building.
I think it's a
So-
stretch to take it out of this fund for that grant.
No, again, we have been working with the Sooke Region's Community Health Network for quite some time on this, and we've never decoupled the community center or the senior center from the housing. So it's always been this project that council has determined through the charrette, the community has determined and council has supported that it would be a center and housing.
Councillor Lajeunesse, then St. Pierre.
Yeah, I think by having the housing. component-
Questions. Remember, we're
Oh,
on
sorry.
questions.
Okay, I don't have a question.
Councillor St. Pierre.
It had been my original, through your worship staff, it had been my original understanding that the coupling of the housing and the community center actually made it easier to get funding for the community center because you were kind of balancing the books on essentially something that BC Housing would be more interested in as opposed to the community center. I have a further question after that, but if I get an answer to that, that'd be nice.
So if you recall, again, a number of months ago, when Mr. McNaughton from BC Housing came and presented to a committee of the whole, the amenity space is something that is eligible through BC Housing funding. So that was the funding that was determined to be the best fit for this project. As we in October 2021, when we extended the memorandum of understanding between the District of Sooke and the Sooke Region Community Health Network, it was always to position ourselves in the very best way for the next draw that comes from BC Housing.
All right, and my next question would be, if I understand correctly, what was on screen a little while ago, what we're looking at is better designs to get us honestly in better compliance with the STEP code. And this would be for all the different components of this particular project. And that this would also put us in a position to access grant funding for both the community center and the housing component. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. My other question is actually with regards to the funding. So originally, I think it was 50,000 per year, and I'd like to get just a confirmation on that was going into this particular fund. Is that correct?
I believe it was 50,000 a year, and the last year that the contribution was made was 2018, if my memory serves.
All right. As it stands, what we've got here is a project that, despite efforts being made, and I know they were made, it's clearly a project that was led by seniors, with the needs of seniors in mind and so on and so forth. It's probably really going to be directed towards seniors just because of the way it all panned out. I'm wondering if there's the option of renewing the funding into a reserve for youth. So that, because this looks like if we move forward this, we're tapping it out. And there's really nothing left for any sort of a youth-led project that would actually serve the needs of youth. And as has been noted in the community and by the community, we also have a desperate need for services and housing for youth. So curious as to
So I'll add a little bit to that. So that is something that council can entertain at any time when it starts to set its budget and establish the reserve funds. A lot of the work that CPark has done through the CRD is a commission that does actively engage with youth regularly, as well as through searching in their own work, is that youth are looking for a space that they can, a safe space, accessible space where they can then come and create their own programming on. So in this case, this space would be available in the evenings, the afternoon evenings. Typically, seniors are looking to access it more in the mornings, early afternoons, and then it would switch out. So it would have the opportunity to do that. So it was the case of finding that synergy so that those conversations continue. They were disrupted, obviously, through the pandemic, but a lot of that is, no, we don't really want to then have to fundraise and build our own space, but we are looking to access an accessible, inclusive space where that isn't at the school. So part of it was, well, there's the community school, and a lot of the studies say, you know, really they just kind of want to get out of school and go somewhere else to find that. So certainly the library with programming, we'll do some. CPark offers another, but there is still the need of just having space and allowing youth the flexibility to program it on their own. Yeah.
That being said, I'm curious as to whether or not we're locked into seniors affordable housing as opposed to youth and seniors affordable housing, because that would actually make me feel a lot better.
There would be the opportunity, because certainly that has come up with searching on identifying what the criteria is and looking for a means to do that. So that's why we're continuing in this way. And certainly, because in this space, every unit would be built out to be universally accessible. So that's where it is the case is there could be another resident who doesn't identify as a senior that may require a space that meets those needs that cannot be met through the other BC Housing or the Hope Center, for example. But predominantly, that would be what this building is choosing to serve. Councillor Lajeunesse and Bateman.
So I guess through you to staff, will the fact that they have a housing component allow them to generate revenue to provide programming and keep the lights on in the seniors and youth center?
Yes, so searching the Souq Regions Community Health Network will be the operator of the facility, and it is part of a sustainability vision for them to have a stable, reliable funding source for them to put right back into programming our community.
Councillor Bateman.
I'd like to move the motion or the recommendation that council approve an additional draw of $100,000 from the Seniors Youth Center Reserve Fund established by bylaw number 717 as requested by the Sooke Region Communities Health Network.
It's moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor McMath. Okay, speaking to it, go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, so you know, we can look back to the 2014 referendum, right, which came in at an 85% in favor of us moving forward with a seniors youth community center. Through the Lot A charrette, as we see in the report here, there's been a series of steps since then. What Searchin has been doing through its work, through its working group, very steady, patient, systematic, smart, strategically coordinated steps along the way. They've come up with this plan with a senior center with intergenerational programming is the key piece regarding the youth component here, which justifies access to the Seniors Youth Reserve Fund. And with the BC Housing component of those 75 senior rental homes, logically atop a senior center in the middle of the town center. And the BC Housing, you know, they've applied for various grants, including BC Housing. They failed on the last go. 17 months from now, September 2023, the next funding window opens. And they've heard from BC Housing. BC Housing really liked the last proposal. It was extremely well put together. However, Souq had its turn. We have the new BC Housing projects coming in already, and it's a big province. So we were told wait and be patient. And so they're not just waiting, they have been continuing. They've got a Van City Good Money grant. Searchin has secured for a full-scale business plan for the complex, which will definitely identify revenue streams that will keep it operating. And now they have scored Sooke's very first FCM Green Municipal Fund grant. You know, this fund has been in place for a good 10 plus years. I'm not sure we've applied to it before, but Searchin went ahead, secured this grant, $200,000, for which they need 50% matching funds. This will generate a detailed architectural, mechanical, electrical, and civil engineering drawings, along with net zero energy modeling calculations. So this would make the Elders Complex, as it's known, an exemplary frontrunner for our town's GHG busting ambitions. So it also sets them up for an application of the Green Municipal Fund's capital grant program. So this seems like a very logical use of this $100,000 in matching funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor McMath. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I really want to thank staff for giving me the assurances that the seniors youth and center would be a large part of this complex. So I'm willing to support the motion. I think it is a little bit of a stretch, but there was enough of it there to satisfy me to come out of this fund. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Councillor Logans and Logans.
Thank you. I do support this. I want to make that clear that I do think this is a great project. I love the idea that came forward in order to pull housing into that specific space and also create the Elders Drop-In Center at the same time. It's a great way to do it. And the group putting this forward has always been really innovative in that way to secure grant funding. The thing that bothers me is that yet again, here we are with a letter in front of us where the word youth is purposefully excluded from this letter. And I feel like every time Searchin comes to council, I have to remind them that youth need to be part of this project. They keep telling us that youth are part of this project and do studies to say that youth are part of this project, but where are they in this newest letter? They're not in it. And for that reason, I'm going to vote against this as a representative for youth on council. I know this will pass, so I'm not concerned about that. I believe that council will pass this, and I think it should be in our community and part of our community. But my role on council is to advocate for youth, and this project continuously excludes them. So I have to vote against it.
That's fair, Councillor. Any other, or Councillor Logans, you're up next.
Yeah, just I'm going to support this. I think this is a small investment and it seems they have a good sustainability plan to keep the thing operational. And with that, they can provide youth programming as well as senior programming.
Councillor St. Pierre.
As I previously noted, I share Councillor Logan's concerns over youth being excluded in everything we see. I just think it really is led by seniors for seniors to meet the needs of seniors. However, I think it's an excellent project. And I think they've done tremendous work on the grants, and not actually using the matching grants to make this happen would be a crime. So I will support, but again, I think we really need to seriously consider representation of youth and youth-led projects, because it's just not happening in this particular case, I think, in the way that it needs to.
Thank you very much, Councillor Logans, for that reminder. So certainly when I have the opportunity to give that feedback, and we'll just look at ways where we can improve upon that in the future. And then hopefully when the next item comes forward, or not next item on the agenda, but when this item returns in a different way, that you'll see that addressed. Okay. I'm in support of this project. I feel it's necessary. I have started up some advocacy to draw attention to this, particularly the location the way it ties in with our future, or not future, actually, future transit stop, but brand new library, and then the Sooke Family Resource and Public Health Center across the way, as well as access to Evergreen Mall and so forth. So there's other pieces that are still coming, and we'll carry on in that way. Okay, so I will now, it's been moved and seconded, so I'll call the question. All those in favor, please. And in opposition is Councillor Logans. The motion carries. Thank you. Okay. All right, moving into item 12, which is our bylaw section. And I know that folks were likely upset that they did not have the opportunity to speak at first reading. However, I need to follow the procedural bylaws that council adopted so that we have fairness on all of these items. And so that's why they're set up in that way. I have reached out to other mayors going through similar process, and they agree they do the exact same thing in their council, so that those who were unable to attend would not feel that they were left out of a process. So now this will carry on to a public hearing, which will be advertised, where all members of the public will be invited to speak on various items. Some background on this is why, when this came forward earlier in the process, council directed staff to schedule a committee of the whole so we could hear from members of the public before moving to first reading, which council has in fact done. And now it's here before us. So I'll turn it over to staff, please.
Thank you. So staff have been working quite quickly over the last 1.5 week cycles just with our committee of the whole meeting and the proposed motions that were passed by council to make the recommended revisions to the draft document. And we're here again tonight, having made those revisions to the official community plan draft, as well as some other grammatical changes as well. And we're quite pleased to have reached this point where we can put a recommendation forward to council for first reading. To go over some of those recommended changes. So we've changed the comprehensive development area second bullet to go from consent to consult with respect to South Nation. The whiff and split land use designation has now been changed to rural residential and is also included within the neighborhood area plan boundaries. And as well, throughout the document, the neighborhood area plan also references whiff and split in addition to the Billings and Kaltassin area. Development permit area guidelines for the foreshore have been revised from 30 meters down to 15 meters. As well, West Ridge Trails land use designation has been changed from the proposed rural residential to the community residential designation. And the final motion that council had passed, which is to have this come forward tonight, which we're pleased to do so. So as I mentioned, the main changes, those that were directed through council, as well as some of the spelling and grammatical errors have been corrected. As well, there's 3 changes that were included to the regional context statement just based on preliminary discussions with CRD staff. And those relate on page 31 to the inclusion of projections to account for what our population projection anticipates over the long term, and how that corresponds to a percentage base out of the West Shore population projection. So we've included a projection of 18% of new growth within the West Shore would be accommodated within Sooke. On page 33, through input from the CRD, also referencing that the bulk of that growth would be included within the town center area, and that would be the focus for infrastructure demands. And then further on page 33, with regard to creating safe and complete communities, that we would also recognize that the projections would be approximately 50% of that new residential and commercial growth to occur in those town center areas. So giving some more numerical basis to what the CRD was seeking from our population projections. And then there's a number of other items that have been listed within the staff report that I won't go over, but those were just specifically to some of those changes just to make sure that they correspond throughout the document, and then providing a little bit more context, like a definition of community economic development throughout the document, and relating that back to our strategy that we've adopted at the end of last year. The big piece for us is the timeline component. So with first reading, if it's successful tonight, that would allow staff to proceed with two large pieces in this process. That's the referral to external agencies, as well as our legal review, which these would occur at the same time and be roughly 30 days plus or minus. And the regional context statement would also be considered by the Capital Regional District. So as we had discussed at our previous meeting, it would have to go to the committee first for review, and then based on their recommendation, that would be forwarded off to the Capital Regional District's board for ultimate approval. And our official community plan would not be able to achieve adoption until there was that confirmation that the board had accepted the regional context statement. So the quicker we're able to get on in that process, the more this lies in our hands to determine when adoption of this could ultimately be achieved. Also, during the time period of April and May, there'll be the public submissions that can be written into to the district to be received and taken into consideration, as well as our open house that we had discussed earlier in the meeting for May 7th at the community hall from noon until 4 p.m. So still opportunities to provide public input on the process. Later on, the proposed amendments will be brought forward to council for consideration. And at that time, second reading can be given. And then going on into approximately June, July, just depending on where the process is falling, public hearing will be advertised in accordance with the Local Government Act. And then public submissions will still continue to be received up until the public hearing date, where the public may attend in person at the council meeting to comment at the public hearing. And then from there, once the public hearing is closed, in going through the process for third reading and adoption, we could anticipate a timeline of approximately June at the earliest, end of June for adoption, or July roughly is based on this timeline being proposed if we hit all of those marks. So with that, that concludes my summary of items on the report. A recommendation is before you. As well, I just some new information that I received through emails today just from the public, just regarding the development permit areas and how those are administered. There are still other processes that we can work on to help streamline and make it a faster process, such as our delegated authorities. So some of these areas that have development permits with specific guidelines, if through the bylaw process, council wishes to delegate some of that authority to staff, that would help along in that process with not having to bring so many development permits forward to council. And we would establish in a staff report which items we felt would be appropriate for council's consideration to see if that could be delegated. Also, we're still waiting for the legislation regarding the delegated authority for minor variance permits. So those development variance permits that come before council with the legislation that can be approved from the province, there will be also that opportunity to consider both development permits and development variance permits as a delegated authority to go through the staff approval process. And at any time through that bylaw, those permits can come forward to council for consideration if the applicant isn't satisfied with the decision of a staff on those permits. So with that, recommendation is for first reading of the official community plan bylaw to consider in conjunction with our 5-year financial plan, as well as our waste management plans, how the official community plan relates to it, and to refer the bylaw to all external agencies and partners for comment, and then to come back to council with that information in preparation for the second reading. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Paulo. So questions for staff, for members of council. Go ahead, Councillor McMahon.
At the open house, what does the layout and the running of that look like, and how are you capturing all of the public feedback and presenting it to council?
Certainly. So we're still working on the storyboard. So we have a graphic artist assisting us in the materials to display the information that was raised on those items that council had raised previously at our last meetings, in addition to other items that we felt further explained the official community community plan, like the floor area ratio and the density questions. So having more of those visuals up on a board that members of the public can walk around the room and review the information, as well as speak with staff and members of council in attendance. And then from there, we'll record that information so that we can bring that back in our staff report to share. Here's what the feedback is. And I'm sure at that time, council will also be able to discuss some of the information that they've heard from the members of the public as well.
How are you capturing that feedback though?
In written form. So we'll be writing down that information, as well as any members of the public that are submitting written information as well. We can bring that forward as an attachment of the written comments.
Do you have the opportunity for members of the public to put their concerns in their own words at that forum?
To like leave a comment
Yeah.
of a form.
Yeah.
They can leave written comments in any format that they wish. Yes. The idea is that on the boards, we're actually going to be having questions that they can put a sticker on the board as an indicator for us to kind of simplify the process to collect that data a lot quicker, as opposed to going through numerous pieces of information. We understand that everybody shares information in different ways. So I do anticipate that people are going to send an email, provide a written letter, however many forms of communication they wish to utilize. Our main approach at the open house is going to be having these stickers that they can put on a scale indicating their level of support or opposition to specific pieces of information. So they can also see how other members of the public are providing feedback as well.
Mhm. And what about capturing like different recommendations?
For specific text changes in the document?
Yeah.
That we would want that information written, or if we can capture it ourselves, writing it down if they're sharing verbally with us. You know, if I receive a phone call, capturing that information and then sharing it with staff for consideration.
Okay, can you go back to your timeline?
Yeah.
Please. In June and July, how long do you foresee the RCS going to the CRD and then coming back? And is it dependent on the amount of alterations that you receive from council?
I see. So typically with the regional context statement, if that's something that is acceptable to CRD staff and then the committee and the board, I'd need specific details from council if they wanted to amend the RCS. Really what we're looking for is just alignment with what's already been prescribed in the regional growth strategy. So if the CRD is saying we've hit the mark there, then I need to have more detail as to what now needs to be changed after the fact. So I envision that if we're successful in going through this timeline, that in mid-June, this could be accepted by the CRD board, and then it would just be left to council at that point as to where we are in the processes for accepting, second reading, the public hearing, third reading and adoption. So we have to see how the conversation unfolds, but I think the bulk of the feedback that we've been receiving at the staff level is less on the RCS and more on the other areas like development permit area guidelines and things of that nature. So I don't anticipate a high change in the RCS, but that's certainly something that could occur.
Okay, and then if we are unsuccessful in this timeline, what does the plan B look like?
So we can continue working on in this process to basically get it as far as we can. But if we do not have the regional context statement adopted, or sorry, the board doesn't have that approved for us by the end of the summer, then we basically can get it all the way up to the point where we're not adopting this official community plan, and that might come at whatever board meeting that this can be considered by the CRD board.
So what would that date look like?
Just if I may, the CRD board meets only once per month. I'm just trying to think if other municipalities have sent it through to a committee first. I don't think so. Usually they go straight to the board on the consent agenda. And that's where it sits. So when any member municipality does an OCP or part of electoral area, I'm just trying to think if they've gone through the planning and protective or governance. I don't think so. I think usually they go straight to the board on the consent agenda, which similar to ours is at the start of the meeting.
So if we don't meet July, it's then August?
The board doesn't meet in August. It would be September.
So it'd be September.
Yes, September, or I think because of the budget process. That one's reserved specifically for the CRD budget. So then it may be actually October
Right.
that they could consider that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, thank you for those questions, Councillor McMath. I was just curious, at our last meeting, I believe, Mr. McInnes, you gave us some timelines on CRD meetings. And I believe we would have had the opportunity for CRD board to see this in later May, I think.
Your worship, Mr. Paulo provided that information. And it is our understanding that it does in fact go to committee and then goes to the board.
Can you remind us of what those dates were?
So May 18th is the committee meeting for planning and protective services. And then their next meeting after May 18th would be July 20th. So that was the information that I had shared at the last meeting, thinking that July 20th would be the soonest, but in conversations with the CRD, they said all things working out favorably, they could work for the May 18th committee meeting to get that on their agenda. And then the June board meeting, I believe, is June 8th. And then the next meeting would be July 13th. And that's where I had indicated the challenge with a July 20th committee meeting would not be able to then be heard in July by the board because they would have met a week prior to that date. And then the August 10th board meeting is only at the call of the chair if everyone's agreeable to holding that meeting. September 21st, I just mentioned, is the budget meeting, which is a special meeting. And then October 12th would be the next one indicated on their agenda. And then by that time, November 16th is their inaugural meeting for all new members.
So it does go to committee, then that would be the CRD Planning and Protective Services Committee.
That's correct.
Okay, so to follow on, public submissions, so will begin to be received. Will that be welcome following first reading?
Yes, we anticipate that comments will begin now that that's been recognized as a bylaw that's been read in at first reading.
Now, I believe on the Picture Sooke website, people have been welcome to submit through this entire process. That's correct.
That's
Okay.
correct.
So will we, I know we've seen through the, there are the big public feedback packages we've received already. Submissions that have come in since those were published, along with those we forward to info@souq.ca, will be included in a subsequent package.
The ones submitted before tonight?
Well, yeah, exactly. Since whenever that was, mid-October, when that package was published, the last package.
I'd have to determine which information was submitted to info and was on the agenda versus which ones were submitted to staff. And then I know recently there have been some submissions that have gone only to council. So I think internally we're trying to work out what has been sent to council can then make its way to the public realm.
So would you recommend to us that we do submit this to info@souq.ca if we feel-
By doing so, that would get it on
Yes,
into the public
okay.
realm.
Further, so to follow up on Councillor McMath and our May 7th open house, it's quite an art and science to capturing on the fly this kind of, certainly written submissions are easy, but those verbal submissions. So how do you plan to capture someone in full flight offering a 2-minute monologue? Will you be taking detailed notes is my question.
Yes, I'll be taking notes as well as other staff in attendance. Certainly when people are in the middle of a conversation, I think a lot of times they also leave that event, have some more time to think about it. And that's where we welcome them to submit additional written comment. And that's where we provide our email address, phone number, whatever form they wish to get in contact with us. But also we talk amongst staff and those in attendance as to, what are some of the themes that we're starting to hear and share that information to develop kind of a common theme, which would then emerge as part of that staff report explaining what we heard, the feedback from the open house.
Wait, there was one more. A public hearing. So we have discussed, and Mrs. Lewis referred to this a bit, that can we gather in a larger space, ideally upstairs at the community hall, to have a proper full-scale public hearing and really advertise the heck out of it and attract an audience that worthy for a document of this significance?
I'd have to defer to our corporate officer just on the specifics of arranging public hearings.
Through your worship, we certainly can do that, but recognizing that we won't have any of our technology, and we can have a microphone, but we won't have our recording devices and things like that. We can see what we can do with IT, but it certainly won't be as what we have now. We won't be able to match that.
Okay, other questions for staff? The question I just have is in regards to the referral process, and on the other slide where it has the, as it goes out to, so referrals and the external stakeholder list, is the province or any other ministries part of that? And which ones, if you, I mean, there's quite a few, but.
Yes, quite a few, and certainly ones that we've already been communicating with. So early on in the process, as part of the initial phases, we spoke with transportation, agricultural land commission, we spoke with the school district. So all of those parties are included as part of that referral process.
Where I'm going with this is, as you know, the province is in the process of implementing DRIPA and forming legislation to that effect. So that's where I'm just wondering, while we are waiting to sort of see how and what that looks like and how it impacts land use, our consulting, mainly staff and the committee, have come up with best efforts as best they can. But it could be likely that we've missed something. So how would we, so that would then be feedback, and they might not even be there yet in terms of preparing that legislation. So that's where I guess we would look at amending the OCP if there was something learned through that process.
Certainly with any type of provincial legislation or best practices that are common to having inclusion within an official community plan or any type of bylaw document, it allows for us to consider adding those amendments to the document. As part of the legal review, that will also be an item that our lawyers will take a look at and consider. I know they've actually just put out a bulletin recently acknowledging DRIPA and the information that municipalities want to take into consideration. So as part of the questions that we will ask at the staff level for our legal review to flag, that is one of the items on our list.
Okay, no, I was just in a legal workshop about this, and yeah, so just wondering if you knew more than what I thought. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, this question to staff. We're going to an open house. We're going to gather as much information as we can. We're taking written submissions, and then we go through the proper process of a public hearing. So if all that happens and it passes, and then we have something glaring come up again, let's say in January of next year, we have the ability to retroactively amend the OCP once again. Is that correct?
That's correct. Council has the ability to amend their bylaws based on any information they feel relevant to include or perhaps remove.
So if we miss something and the public missed something, and in January saying, wow, this was stupid, we could come back and make that change. So even going through the process that we're going through, which is pretty exhausting, and I commend staff for doing all the work and getting as much public input as they can, there's always opportunities in the future to change it if something is glaringly wrong. So thank you for that.
Okay, anything else from members of council? Any questions? Okay, so we have sort of a suite of recommendations here. Corporate officer, can these all be read as a block, or do they need to be done individually?
Through your worship, they can be read as a block because they all need to be accomplished.
Okay, very good then. So here we go. Yes, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. So I have probably 14 pages worth of comments here. When will I get the opportunity to bring these thoughts forward into the process? Is that at second reading? Oh, following the motion. Okay,
Because
got
there's
it.
nothing on the floor yet.
Excellent,
So
thank
I
you.
think that's where it may just be easier, and that's where I was curious about separating them or putting them together. So I'll put them all together, and then that would be your opportunity to comment, okay? Okay, so here we go. So the recommendation is that council give first reading to the official community plan bylaw number 800/2022. That council consider the official community plan bylaw number 800/2022 in conjunction with the budget and 5-year financial plan. That council consider the official community plan number 800/2022 in conjunction with the waste management plans. That council refer the bylaw to all external agencies and partners for comment, and that council directs staff to report back at a future council meeting on the input and recommend any changes to the draft prior to council considering the second reading of the official community plan bylaw number 800/2022. So that's where we may see a time for changes. So Councillor St. Pierre is moving this, and it's seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Okay, so speaking list, Councillor St. Pierre, you have the floor.
So I'd like to recognize, first of all, that this is a process. I know that there's been concerns over the amount of public consultation that was possible during these extreme times, but fortunately, the community has stepped up to let us know where we went wrong and continues to do so, and I hope will continue to do so. I feel it's unfortunate at this point that people that probably represent a good number of the people that show up at an open house actually came down tonight and don't have a chance necessarily in the way that things are structured. I hope potentially people will write any thoughts you have right now and just pass them directly to us, because that's also an option. We could do that kind of thing. Having said that, I do think that in order to actually move forward with this process, we need to get on with it and to pass first reading, because that will allow us to move towards the open house and every other piece of it, continue to get input from the community and continue to evolve the document to where it needs to be. And we do need a new OCP. There's no doubt about that. The last one is Swiss cheese at this point. So that's all I have to say at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I do understand the concerns of the public, and we have been going at this process a long time, and I know COVID was kept blindsiding us over and over again, because you think, oh, it's going to be over in 3 months. It's not. Over in 6 months. It's not. Over in a year. It wasn't. And we're going through this process at the same time, doing our best job to get the information. With that being said, it's a good example of a few weeks ago, the public came to us with some errors that they considered were very large concerns, and council reacted to that. And we made the necessary changes. And again, we are going back to the public. There will be some opportunities to, again, point out some things that they may not agree with. And that's part of the process. That's what it's all about. And council will react to those concerns. Some will win the day, some probably won't, but we will listen. That's our job. That's what we've been trying to do for the last 2 years, working through this process, and there's still more to come. And we look forward to hearing from people. This is your community and your community plan, and it's not ours, it's yours. And it's our job to get it done. And this puts it on a track to get it done. And again, we're not going to dismiss your concerns. We're going to look at each and every one of them and do our best to incorporate that in the official community plan. So I don't want people to think that we're trying to give this the bum's rush. We're not. We are willing to listen. And I think you could see in the last few weeks at council, we did listen. We did make some changes, big changes, and that's our job, and we'll continue doing that job. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other speakers? Councillor Bateman, you wanted to comment, so.
I guess I'm curious how we do this process of this 200 and some or 240 page document. How do we bring forward and discuss such a weighty document. I think we earlier talked about going page by page. If there's anything on a particular page, we call it and we discuss it. And that would seems logical to me, but it would take perhaps a considerable amount of time, or maybe not.
I think it depends, and I'll answer that. I know you have more comment, or I'll try to answer that. Is part of it is by sending it out to the external, like, I hear what you're saying about going through it, but we're also needing to send it out to the external agencies. So that's where there could be a shift in language. So doing it now for what may end up changing may not be the right time. So I think it's the case, this is where adjustments are going to come prior to, pardon me, considering second reading. And I think that's where council would need to discuss then how do we want to continue that, but also recognizing the committee's already done that. So as my understanding, the committee already went through the document that way. So are we, one committee in the audience is saying no, but I'm going with our liaison here. Is council wanting to do that? I'm not sure if that is the will of council or not. So I think that's something that we'd have to weigh out. Maybe I'll ask Councillor Bateman to comment a bit more.
Tell you the truth, I wouldn't have a big problem doing that. We'd have to have a special session and send in food and probably alcohol too, but
let's keep.
No, sorry. Okay, I was just kidding around. Sorry. What I would hope for Councillor Bateman is perhaps if he could give his 18 pages to staff, because it may be some of the things that I don't know what your concerns are, but maybe it's something that is also going to come up with the public. So, I mean, I know how very thorough you are when it comes to paperwork, and I very much respect that. But I'm just wondering if that might be the better way to go, is give it to staff first. We see what comes out of that these two public meetings we're going to have. And then we sit, if there's still unresolved things, that's when we sit down and hash out those things that has to be done by the political body, which is us. Would that be suffice for you, or?
Yeah, probably.
But no, I hear what you're saying, because there's pieces around the equity and social inclusion, and I learned a bit more at a different workshop in terms of how we approach that. But some of it is, this is meant to be a high level document. And then council would need to adopt other policies that would then look at doing X, Y, and Z that are in alignment with what is in the OCP. And certainly it is an area that needs to be addressed in a way. It's almost sort of an attitude, though, more in the community overall in some ways. So I think it, in the case where when this document comes back at second reading, I'm going to ask staff this question. What would it look like after it's gone through that external referral? Would it be the case that here's the documents and here's the comments from various external agencies and groups? And then what would that look like? Would it be a black line version with comments, or what?
Mm-hmm. So yes, we would have the information provided from the respective referral agencies, and then based on our understanding of what needs to be updated, we would present those as proposed amendments to the bylaw prior to second reading being given, so that you understand council is accepting these changes based on input from Agricultural Land Commission or Ministry of Transportation, whoever the respective parties are, and that staff have reviewed it and have determined what the correct wording is for insertion into the document. Or if it's something that's to delete from the bylaw as well, there might be something that is no longer required because another agency has said it's no longer a legislative requirement.
Okay, so this would be then after it's gone through the external agencies, our own legal review, and it's gone through the CRD board for consistency with the regional context statement. Then it's coming to us after all those other pieces are done.
The referral agencies could come before council before the CRD board gives
Okay.
approval. Really, what their focus is making sure that there's that alignment between the regional context statement section of the document and their regional growth strategy. The other agencies would be looking at specific sections of the document that are specific to agriculture, in the case of the Agricultural Land Commission, or transportation if it was the Ministry of Transportation. So they'll all be looking at different sections, but what we require for full adoption of the official community plan is that the CRD board has accepted our regional context statement.
To that point, Councillor Bateman, I'm just thinking that when this comes back and staff are scheduling the meeting, that it really should be a special council meeting or a committee of the whole that deals with this item specifically, so that council has the time to make those determinations. And we very, very well be sitting here doing just that. I don't know how else to. I need to figure that one.
Yeah, I have lots of specific line item, page number items, but I have some high level material I'd like to maybe share tonight. So, this is a comprehensive high level document that hopefully is readable. I think community members would go to the OCP first, and they need to know that it is this overarching policy. It states it well here on the purpose of this plan pages. What's missing to me in that section is context with earlier Souq OCPs and CRD village and area plans. Now, the 2001 OCP, our first, did list those documents. And I think it just for the historical content, we're not here at year zero, we're 22 years into municipalities history. So I'd like to see some context statements. That's the storyteller in me, would like to know that this is part of an ongoing iterative process moving forward in time. I noticed with many
Sorry,
OCP.
just a point of order.
Go ahead, Councillor McMahon.
Maybe have our health break.
Oh, that's a good call. Thank you for that. So Councillor Bateman, can you just pause there? And we'll move to a health break, and I'll resume the meeting with you. So council, I believe, can you stop talking? I still have the floor. Given that you'll need to make your way all the way down to the very bottom of the building and up again, so it'll be 10 minutes to allow for that. So if you can synchronize your watches, is 8:32. I will resume at 8:42 precisely. Okay, everyone, welcome back. We'll now be resuming the regular council meeting, and I will turn the floor back over to Councillor Bateman. And a reminder, councillors, you have up to 5 minutes.
5 minutes. So I've used a good 2 minutes already. I'll just, to carry on, I'll just note that many OCPs have detailed lists of the master plans and reports that need to align with the OCP. So it'd be good to see a page dedicated to that, as it is in the Courtney OCP that's just being released. Under climate action, there's no reference to a declared climate emergency by the District of Sooke. There's only a single reference to low carbon resilience. There's no reference to the 7% solution nor the citizen mobilization. There's no reference to any of the keystone climate action documents that the district has signed, starting with the BC Climate Action Charter. I'm curious about why we're not using the latest census data for our population numbers and numbers of dwellings, which are available at this point, with more to come in June. I'm curious about the Colliers International numbers and the CRD growth projections in terms of population. I note that the word compassion is not included in this document. There is a very nice statement about caring in the vision statement, but we are a compassionate community and one of only 100 or so in the world. So I think that's an important piece. Beyond that, I think we need to have a better definition of net zero than is currently in the document. There's no clear reference to the sequestration aspects of net zero. And the rest are all, I'm sure I could go on, but I've used my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. And what I would suggest, if you have time, is I would forward those to Mr. Powell, and then he doesn't have to sort of write down and miss anything that you've said, or you could watch the webcast again, but if you have it, that would probably be convenient. Okay, good stuff. Other speakers, other members of council? It's been moved and seconded, so here's your opportunity to speak on first reading. Councillor McMath.
Is our objective here to get through first reading, hear back from third parties, hear back from the public, and then have this robust discussion going into all the nuances and the ramifications of those pieces?
Yeah, because that's where we're at first reading right now. We're sending them out. We'll get all of that, and then it'll come back in a different form for council to consider second reading. Is that correct? Yes.
Okay, then I will hold those until we come back.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lajeunesse.
Yeah, I think having a workshop where we can pick through page by page and everybody can come with their notes prepared and go through that as Councillor Beto has suggested. I think that would be a great idea to do that.
Okay, so that would be council, like council can't hold a workshop, like we're just stuck as committee of the whole or in a council format because the work doesn't qualify to meet without the members of the public here. So we could certainly do that, I think, is the case of looking at what the next draft is, and then council could do that. But it is the case of being prepared for it so that the meeting time is used well. So I think that's something to consider. And of course, our staff need to figure out how to plan that. So it may be the case of the staff report, here's what we've heard back. I'm trying to think and talk at the same time. And so then it's the case of, okay, we may just have to turn the page, any grammatical or spelling loss, whatever, get caught. And we just try to do it that way. And it may be the case on some pages, there is no comment at all because it's fine, right? It'll just vary. Councillor Logans.
I think what could be helpful is that we have an agenda that sets out, like, each agenda item is a chapter or something that will give the public and us some structure as to where our comments will lie, so that it's not completely all, we don't spend 90% of the meeting speaking about one or two things and run out of time and have to schedule again. We sort of have a structure on where we're headed during that meeting, because I feel like that we should have done that in the committee of the whole as well, right? Obviously, we're doing it again, I think it's still a good idea because we'll have a lot more public input with the extra open house, et cetera. But if we can,
The challenge, like where I sort of maybe made that strange expression is, my only concern is that we would be doing that in the public without the public commenting, because this is moving in ahead in a bylaw format. So then the public hearing wouldn't be, the public wouldn't be able to speak until it actually hit public reading, which means we've given it first and second reading, and then we schedule the public hearing, and then it'll be a formal meeting here. We're basically one after the other. And then when it closes, council can't consider anything further than that. So that would be the only piece, is that while if we broke it down that way, that would work, but the public wouldn't be able to comment on those items.
well, this is sort of where I struggle
Yeah.
with it, because we should have, why does council suddenly have comments that haven't been brought up ever before?
I don't know. You'd have to
Exactly.
have
So
that from
that's where I
members.
struggle with it. These are, I mean, we've been going through this process for a while now, but I do understand the value of that as well. So if we can find a way to have those conversations, we certainly could do that.
Councillor McMath?
Just to speak to that, there are lots of specialties that none of us have. And so pieces that have come up are pieces that like, they don't lie within our strengths. So as we continue to hear back from the public and get that insight and that perspective, that's why you have pieces coming up that although there are many good intentions in this OCP, there are a lot of unintended consequences that we may not realize just incorporating our own skill set. So that's why you have these pieces coming forward now.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think we'll just need to look. I'm just trying to think of what that's gonna look like without, and in the fact that it is in a bylaw form, so it would be a special council meeting. It's just the public commentary cannot happen, which is why it's weird to me. I'm just gonna ask our corporate officer.
No, I think that you were right on the head there, that it could either be a special meeting or a committee of the whole. It could be structured however you like, but it will be without public comment. But that would be no different than receiving a bylaw for first and second reading, as we normally would with any other bylaw. Council could make an amendment, like give it first reading. Now that bylaw exists. Then council could amend it at second reading. And then that's the public bylaw that gets put out for notification for the public hearing. So as long as that is done before second reading, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, so for clarity then, this then would come to us in a committee of the whole, right?
Yes.
Without public comment.
Correct.
Because, okay, and then that would allow council the way to do it. You could lay it out by chapter. So then at least the members of the public following could follow where we are in the agenda. We just have like one to, go all the way through that way, but you're right. So that we don't get caught up on a map on page 2 and then it's 4 hours later and then, oh, we're out of time. Councillor Logans?
I think because we're sort of adding additional pieces to this and adding another opportunity for council to go deeper into it, I think it's important to note that it's not completely without public comment. We have the open house sort of to feed that, right? So, and then also bringing the public a final document that we've gone section by section through, I think is way more valuable than bringing to a public hearing a document that we haven't had a chance to go through. And then the public hearing, I mean, we're going to hear so much more because we haven't had the chance to express the things that we want changed either, right? So while we would be saying there's no public input at this one particular meeting, I think we have the other opportunities in lieu of that, and also have the opportunity to then bring forward a final document that makes more sense to the public for the public hearing.
So in terms of making the time work for everybody, this is where like staff is going to need to reach out to find availability. in an ideal world, it may be helpful to start in the daytime so that we're not going late into the night. And I know that that may be a challenge for some members of council. But it may, if we have quorum, it may be the case that some of us are starting this meeting and then others, when you can join us, would join us at whatever opportunity you could. So that we're not going into 1 and 2 in the morning, because it feels like that's gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I completely understand schedule conflicts. I mean, it's up to, I'll leave that up to you. You decide who gets excluded from the process.
Yeah, I don't know. So I think that's where we'll make best efforts. It's not my intent to exclude anyone. I just know that visibly council starts to close, you know, everyone is getting tired as the meeting goes on. So it'll depend on how much everyone has to say. It'll be done in an hour. Who knows? Okay, so we'll see how we go. Okay. All right, other members of council wishing to speak on first reading. Okay, so I'll just be brief on this. Is I appreciate that this is a new document. We all have our thoughts, our emotions, all of our knowledge about it, what we like or don't like or whatever. It is sort of bigger than one individual, though. It is to guide the community forward. I appreciate the work that Councillor Bateman has done. He's been immersed in this for a long time, through a pandemic and all, as well as members of the committee. And there's pieces that we're still trying to work through. In some cases, some that some community members like and others don't. And that's the reality of it. I don't think this document is going to be everything to everyone. In the end, there's some decisions that need to be made as we go into the future. There's also, when I talked about DRIPA or mentioned it briefly, this is a big deal. This is historic and it's going to change how we view land use into the future, and rightfully so. So there are those pieces that are sort of beyond us. So the best we can do is communicate what we learn and take that going forward. I think there's other places where council can look at how we, or future councils can, and working with staff on how we implement different pieces and what direction we give to staff. And that's where Mr. Paolo spoke to the delegation of authority bylaw. And what tools would council need, or what do we want to ensure that staff have going forward? So that other conversation and will set to come. But in the current reality right now, it's a tough time out there for residents, and for us as a local government, it's just been nonstop from the pandemic. Before the pandemic occurred, we had our youth walking out of school. They're like, we're done. We don't see hope in our future. And this was led by young Greta, who galvanized the youth, not just in the broader community, but here in our community as well. They don't see themselves in the future here, and they want to. This is their home. And so certainly that happened. And then a pandemic hit, and then we could smell the fires burning from across not only California, but across our country as well, and parts of Island. And colleagues that we know, and we know through conferences and the like, are on TV every day, leading evacuations out of their cities and towns. And then a heat dome hit, and we know many in our community were impacted. We may have fared some better, but there was loss of life from that event. The opioid crisis right now is killing 7 British Columbians every day. 7 every single day, not just in other places across the world. This is in BC and here within our community. So imagine the mental health impact on the families and supports that's having. It's devastating. Then we had more wildfires, then we had more flooding, and then the term atmospheric rivers hit us, and our road networks were tested. So the question is now is why, and the demand that I'm hearing is from is we need to build back better. And I know that's a term that everyone is getting tired of hearing, but it's because of the devastating impact on infrastructure. I think in Sooke, we fared well, except for Charters Road. And then you see when that one road, this one sort of worn out road is shut, just how much traffic spilled out onto the highways. So who is impacted the greatest? Children and families just trying to get to school. And why are so many parents driving their kids? There's a shortage of drivers and there's no after-school care in our community. Any parent looking for after-school care, there is none right now. So what does that do? Who does that impact? Women, mainly as the second earner, caregivers, children, and those that are just trying to get by. So it's a hard time. And then beyond that, it's over and over again. And now we're watching devastation happen in the Ukraine and how those families are being impacted. And now they're starting to arrive here. So I know for some, it's hard to hear. We're trying to build more housing and find more space. But I just can't sit here and say, no, no one else is welcome to be here with all of this happening in and around us. We're an inclusive community, and Sooke has always been a safe and welcoming place for all. So it's finding a way forward in this. And I think that the committee and our staff certainly have made some best efforts to try to put something forward to guide us in a better way. We've been appealing to the province and the federal government, as even recently as this morning, that those levels of government can't just dump it all on local government to come up with every single answer and leave us without the tools and the resources that we need. It's all fine for them to not necessarily hide, but they're not as visible as we are at the local level in our communities. And we need the support if we're actually going to successfully build back better and create a safe and inclusive home for all. And that takes all orders of government working together, not just one passing stuff down to the rest of us, mainly local government, to solve. So that's where I think our staff is trying to find some best practices that they're introducing to us. And for some, it's the case, well, we've never had to do that before. Never had to build that way or do those things or consider that. Well, unfortunately, you need to, because I know half the mayors or more of them every single time an EOC is activated on who's doing that call here in the province. And it's tough and they're getting burned out. And some of them want to move here because we're doing some fun things. And they're just tired of being in an EOC, Emergency Operations Center, 9 months, 10 months out of the year is all they're doing, is responding to one event after another. The debate over climate action is over. It's here and we're living it. And we need a safe community for the future. And I'd like to see our children have hope once again. I think we all do. So it's not just about today, it's about the next generation and the 6 more behind them that also want to live in this community and call this place home as well. So we'll carry on with the work, and I thank council for a few minutes. So on that note, I'm going to call the question, please. All those in favor of the block? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Good job, everyone. Moving along to 12.2, here for adoption now is the zoning amendment bylaw. I need my glasses again. Okay, so 12.2 is that council adopt the bylaw cited as zoning amendment bylaw number 822-600-89 2022. Moved by Councillor Logans, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. 12.3, in this case, there's no further comments because the public hearing is closed. So that's why I'm not asking you to speak, but you all know that, right? 12.3, zoning amendment bylaw that council adopt the bylaw cited as zoning amendment bylaw number 840-600-90 2022. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Logans. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. 12.4, that council adopt the bylaw cited as revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw number 842 2022. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. There's no new business. So item 4, or pardon me, section 14, correspondence requiring action. The first one is 14.1, fear from Wanda Sanford. This was pulled by Councillor Bateman. Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Okay, so following up on your very eloquent comments about the the state of the nation, the hard times faced by so many. This is one letter we received from a Sooke resident. She's in her late 60s. She's recently been, I don't know if the word is rent-evicted, but she's has to leave her rental at the end of the month, end of May, excuse me. And she did find some temporary housing in a 30-foot travel trailer on a friend's 3-acre rural property. And that friend, crossing all the Ts and dotting the Is, phoned the district, or perhaps it was the CRD. We're not sure exactly. I did reach out to the letter writer and did not hear back, but she was told, no, this was not permissible within the current bylaw structures. Mr. Paulo then wrote a letter that's included in our agenda here tonight, which really very clear exploration of the landscape. The BC building code needs to be changed to allow tiny homes. And once that happens, local governments can consider updating their zoning bylaws to allow them. He notes that campgrounds currently allow RVs as a site for temporary accommodation, and that our housing needs report identifies manufactured homes as the best possible affordable permanent dwelling. However, they're in the district of our size at 56 square kilometers is not much land availability. So anyway, I decided to, through the Souq Homelessness Coalition, which I'm the co-chair of, we've just been through a strategic planning process, and one of the 28 ideas that came forward was a matchmaking service that would pair up willing homeowners with RV dwellers in a relationship that would be determined, very carefully managed relationship with protocols, with police checks, with neighbor agreements, with a whole series of just carefully considered measures. It would be a time-limited project with perhaps 20 to 30 matches. And it would be done as a pilot project that could be and is to be framed as an emergency measure. That's the key point here, is that we have people, we already in Souq have a number of situations with people living in RVs in situations where there are no complaints coming in from neighbors to our bylaw services, and hence that carries on, but it's carrying on without being legitimized. There's possibility of, these are vulnerable, there's no terms of engagement for these situations. So what I'd like to do tonight is move that the Souq Homelessness Coalition's RV working group be invited to make a presentation at the next committee of the whole meeting, where we can have a discussion about this issue. We can learn about the existing barriers and whether there's any legs in this idea.
Okay, so let's get the motion up and then we'll look for a seconder, okay?
So that's that the Souq Homeless Coalition's RV working group be invited to make a presentation at the next committee of the whole meeting.
Okay, so that's been moved. Is there seconded by Councillor Logans? So you can second it first. Okay, go ahead.
Sounds good. I'm wondering if Councillor Bateman would entertain a friendly amendment, considering our next Cal meeting may be reserved for the OCP, that we say an upcoming Cal meeting, and then we can hear from them.
So say maybe strike out the next and
Yeah,
change to
upcoming,
upcoming committee of the whole. I think that's friendly, so I won't get a mover for that.
Well, knowing it's an emergency, right? So.
Because we're also have a
There's a certain
housing crisis I
urgency
meant to
here, yeah.
ask. Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. So anything further you would like to add to motivate?
Well, just that when we received this letter, we had a good emailed conversation, council did. You know, there are some legit, you know, real issues that need to be dealt with here. Things such as, oh dear, it's fine, yeah.
Okay, moved and seconded. You wanted to speak to the motion? Okay, go ahead, Councillor McMahon.
Are you liaisoning with the RCMP and Sooke? Because you referenced that they would be assisting you with this project. Have you connected with them?
Well, there's a really good point. Yeah, that's a great point. Staff Sergeant Smith, Kevin Shaw. Yeah, he's engaged with the Souq Homelessness Coalition, and yes, absolutely, that would be part of the ongoing.
I only bring it up because at the last presentation, they had advised us that they were at like half of their staffing capacity. And so just as a resource, I just don't know how much availability they would have to help you with that.
My hope.
We'll get more information once they
Yeah.
present, and then I think we can see where it goes from there.
Yeah, that's just what I'm hoping that you'll bring with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Logans.
Yeah, and they do liaise frequently with the Souq Homeless Coalition. They're part of that group, so that's where the communication would funnel through.
Okay,
It's just more that it's like a working component and using them as a resource rather than just a liaison, because you mentioned something about doing checks.
so let's talk
Yeah.
about this when it comes forward, because I'm not following this train here at all. Okay, we need more information and then we'll talk about it and then we'll go from there. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. And then on the correspondence itself, can we receive that for information, please? Moved by Councillor Logans and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Anything further? Okay, all those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, the next up is a request from the Souq Fall Fair for sponsorship. And this is for the Scarecrow contest. So it is that council approve a sponsorship of $25 to the Souq Fall Fair for the Scarecrow contest with funds allocated from the sponsorship account. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Anything further? See none, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Just keep trying to find an easier way for these requests because they're so important. I know they're very difficult to judge. It's very hard work, actually. They are, because you have so much variety. Okay, the next is a request from the Souq Fine Arts. So they are looking for a sponsorship to the brochure, the program. It's in person. That's how it's planned, which is really exciting. Beautiful online, but even more amazing in person, I think. So there's a requester here. I'm just trying to look in the email here. The ranges from $100 to $5,000. So that's quite a range. Councillor Beddoes.
Does staff have any record of what we've given them in the past in the way of a sponsorship for their brochure?
3 over strips. Unfortunately, I don't have that information.
Just because they've done it. I know it's a couple of years ago, but I think they must have asked us before.
Oh, I didn't look it up. Councillor St. Pierre.
Through your worship to staff, just wondering what we have left in the sponsorship fund.
Through your worship, after the resolution that just passed for $25, the annual budget is $2,500, so it would be less than $25.
Okay.
So almost $2,475. So we haven't spent any of it. Okay, Councillor.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to note that this letter from former Mayor Janet Evans does note that 2022 is an election year. So I think part of the message here is that anyone running for office is welcome to place an ad in the brochure. The rates range from $100 up to $5,000, as you stated.
Yes, I'm aware of that, but I think the ad, should council wish to put in an advertisement, it would be more welcome back artists. We're so excited about your event, and we on our own or whoever can then make a different determination on their own. This would be strictly a Thank you so much, amazing volunteers, and welcome back artists, something of that nature. Councillor Beddoes, then St. Pierre.
Yeah, I'm just willing to make a motion of $500, buy a $500 ad, whatever it is, I don't know.
Okay, the council approves a $500 sponsorship to the Sooke Fine Arts Society in their 2022 brochure, moved by Councillor Beddoes, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Anything further on the $500? What are we, Councillor Logans?
I just was hoping that along with this, I do approve of it. Along with this, I'm hoping they can get back to us with the size. I'm guessing there are different sizes for different prices. So if we can see what the size is so that we can prepare an ad accordingly.
Yeah, and our communication, Ms. Machada?
Sorry, just to answer your previous question, I just was able to find here that we last year increased our ad to $225.
But that's because it was virtual. It was online. So $500 would be a nice one. I think our staff will be in touch. They'll make something work. And I think it's just something they'll come up with wonderful language. Anything else? Okay, so all those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Verbal reports from members of council. Who would like to go first? Councillor St. Pierre.
So this was a busy week for Councillor Lejeunesse and myself. I won't step on his thing, but we attended both ABICC and LGLA. Both events were excellent in terms of actually meeting with various elected representatives across the island, figuring out what the island needs to do for itself along with Sunshine Coast, putting forward recommendations to UBCM so we can actually have more and better advocacy with the province. So that was excellent. The LGLA was also really, really good in terms of actually preparing us for the work that we do and often don't have necessarily the right training for. So that was good. And especially a special note was the address by Dr. Bonnie Henry, an amazingly kind, empathic, and informed person with really incredible values, just really uplifting.
Thank you. I was there too, you know. All right. Councillor Lajeunesse.
Yeah, I would echo those comments actually, and just to note that the mayor provided the interview for Dr. Bonnie Henry and did a stellar job of that. And yeah, it really is therapeutic, I think, to get together with colleagues from around the island and around the province, and it really puts our issues, our local issues, into perspective, and I think it made me feel better about our problems, because there are other places who have many worse issues to deal with than we do. And yeah, that's about it.
Other speakers? Councillor Bateman.
So I went to the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities Convention. I didn't go to the Local Government Leadership Academy this year, but AVIC in Victoria was a real deep dive. We got to vote on a collection of resolutions. CAO McInnes was with us at the Souq table. We, fascinating to be re-engaged and exhausting at post-COVID with fellow councillors, mayors, and staff. So lots of highlights for me, but a couple of minor things. At the trade show, I ran into someone from a forestry company, which led me to an engagement correspondence with Mosaic Forest Management regarding the mural at Cedar Grove Mall, which is model that murals showing sustainable forest practices as seen through a 1990s lens and painted by the late Reverend Bill Dixon. And that mural is flaking away. The paint is bubbling up. It's recently been tagged with some green paint, which are, little saplings have been put into the mural, which I find interesting. So anyway, I've approached Mosaic and asked, would they in fact consider undertaking financing some restorative work on that? And also North Cowichan Mayor Al Sebring put out a call to local fire services to donate extra firefighting gear as requested by a friend of his in Odessa in the Ukraine. And I forwarded that request to Chief Reuter. And he did source some gear, but as it turns out, it's excess to need at this point. But he engaged with Mayor Sebring and got a big thank you for the offer. And then finally, I'll just follow up on the last payphone in Sooke, which got me into the Sooke News Mirror. Wow, always the big issues Jeff gets to represent. So we're losing our last payphone, the one at Cedar Grove Mall outside the Pharmasave. And I learned a few things. Just 3 calls at the $1.25 per call rate were made from that phone in all of last year. So not being utilized very much at the per call rate. So people can still make free collect calls from it. The company that services these phones, WiMAX in Calgary, is the last company in Western Canada providing payphone servicing, and it's phasing itself out of business because basically there's no more payphone replacement parts being manufactured, and there's a lack of skilled employees in this field. So, so there's 899 payphones left in BC, as it turns out, and they'll all be phased out in due course. TELUS did offer us, but they define it as a heritage technology. And in the letter we received, they stated, they might be interested in preserving as a little monument a payphone. So I'm not sure. We got to move on eventually. But interestingly, they do have some very I'm going on and on here. They have some, they're committed to inclusivity and access to services by low-income and vulnerable citizens through their mobility, internet, and tech for good programs. And TELUS recognizes that still leaves a small percentage of citizens without ready access to phones. And it's interesting that the men and women in the white lab coats at TELUS are trying to develop some new solutions for outdoor payphones, very rugged. Yeah, so we might be on the list for that kind of technology. Anyway, that's it. CD Saturday. No, I'll stop.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, just a little news on Sea Park. We're really happy that 2 service clubs have stepped up to subsidize the lifeguard training, because as you know, in Sea Park, we have a hell of a time getting lifeguards. So the Rotary Club and the Lions Club are going to subsidize those swimming programs and get some more people qualified in lifeguard training. I think it's about $2,000 each for each club. So it's pretty pleased that service clubs again stepping up to help out in Sooke.
Councillor
And I
McMahon.
believe the concrete was poured, wasn't it?
It's poured. I saw it. I walked on it. Yeah, it was safe to walk on. Councillor McMath or Logans? No? Okay. The floor is poured. So that all happened last week. So I know that there's a lot of interest now as we get this new amenity up and rolling. It's in a beautiful area, stunning views from there. So it's great to see this amenity come together. There are also 2 basketball hoops in Sooke. 2 basketballs at Broomhill Park. And I was there on Sunday and it was nonstop activity for basketball, all different age groups coming together to play ball. Like, how wonderful is that? And to shoot hoops. It's one of the most easily accessible sport for many to get to. So it's something that we've been waiting a long time for basketball hoops, and we have 2 now. So that's great. A couple of things. I have been pushing, as you know, always items around healthcare and housing and highways. So those are sort of the themes of which I meet with our MLA on a routine basis. And so we had the opportunity to meet and included, I was delighted to have Chief Planis with us as we discuss these items. So continuing to progress items in those areas and in particularly the access to health. So that's another piece that's continuing to move forward. On policing, we seemingly may be the receiver of some good news soon, but until I know there's been some media coverage about the cost of e-com or the 911 call service. So this isn't to take away from the excellent and necessary work that happens there. It's just a matter of why did the province decide in the middle of a long-term agreement that we are now to pay X amount of dollars annually only on the South Island? So that's the issue I have. We have a long-term agreement with the RCMP and that puts some certainty. We know as our population increases, we pay more. These are all things we can plan for. But in the middle of that, for someone to say, oh, we don't want to pay this. We shouldn't have to pay this. And then this has happened at the federal level to then call up the province and say, hey, we're not paying this. We did pay 20%, you're paying 80%. And then the provinces say, oh, we don't want to pay that 80% either. Okay, local government, you can pay. And so that was my meeting 2 days before Christmas Eve. I had no idea what it was about. Myself and 9 other South Island mayors are basically, we're not paying this and you can start paying this. And I'm like, well, how much are we talking about? Is this like $1,000 or what? Oh, we don't know that yet, but we'll let you know. And then it took a year. No, this is a significant 3% tax hit coming our way. So yeah, it's enough to say, no, this isn't happening. So it seems like we may be getting a reprieve for a few years. So it buys us more time to put our advocacy platform together for when that happens. But they're also now recognizing, okay, we can't just pick on the South Island. This needs to be considered more broadly across the province. Like, why not the North Island? And sorry to my colleagues in the North and the interior or elsewhere that will also have to pay, but I just don't feel it's solely ours to pay. The other break is through the federal budget that was released. Our prevailing, or the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, has been observing the RCMP costs of unionization and other things like body worn cameras, DNA testing, that again, the federal government agreed to, but then said, okay, local government, you can pay. So it's all fine for them to make this decision, but they need to then also pay for it, or at least have us involved in those discussions, which they didn't. So we're sort of waiting for more of the detail to come out in the budget. But again, that is something that we were forecasting, preparing for. But it also means that it may be something that they're recognizing the cost pressures on local government. So we'll wait a bit more for those to untangle, but I think that will enable us to carry on, because with all the work that we're trying to do, we can't do all of this if different entities are deciding, okay, well, we're not paying, so you pay, and we're not going to give you any notice. So this is where local governments are very unified in terms of pushing back more on those things. So we'll wait for more of that to come, but it's ongoing advocacy that's happening there. It's a bit of a blur being at both the ABICC and then also at LGLA. I am a board member there. So at LGLA in particular, I do have an active role through that, the work that happens there. But a highlight for me was interviewing Dr. Henry and then doing a closing element with others. In the meantime, though, there's something that I want to raise is there's some gossip out there that is directed at our staff. I don't like it. I have been seeking a bit of legal advice on this, on what to do. I know that members of the public can say whatever they choose. Previous councils have made times where they have looked to investigate pieces, but yes, members of the public are free to express as they will. I just feel that our staff are defenseless when this happens. I don't like it when it comes to me as elected or when my councillors are picked on, but we get it. We sign up for the job. We get the good and the bad and the nasty and the ugly. Don't like it, but it's part of the reality. Staff are our employees, and we need to create a safe space. We want them to get to know our community as they are. to do the good work that they're doing, to uphold professionalism, and to treat their employees with respect and dignity. And so I'm just saying, I'm calling it out. I don't like to see my staff picked on, and I don't like gossip. I don't go into a business and gossip about their employees. I don't think it's appropriate. So I don't have any other means of doing that except to say that as the chair of this council, as the CEO of this organization, please stop it. And if there's a problem with how our employees are performing, there's a mechanism to deal with that. But if it continues, then I just don't like the fact then I will take taxpayer money and have to investigate it. How does that serve our community when they're just trying to do good work? Anyone who's operating a business wouldn't tolerate, so I cannot tolerate it, and I won't. I'm standing by the staff and the job that they're doing. I don't agree with everything that they do. But saying and spreading harmful things just because council did something you don't like, that's a bit odd to me. So I just don't see what that'll accomplish. If the intent is to have council fighting with one another, we're pretty unified in that we're not going to do that. We're going to be on the high road. We trust and respect one another. We're even actually kind of becoming friends, which maybe to some out there a bit unusual. And is that what this is about? Council's performing well, so let's pick on the staff. That's pretty low hanging fruit. So I'll leave it at that. The other piece that I find disturbing, and it's taking me a while to find the words within myself to find this, is I'm really upset that hate symbols are appearing in our community. So our staff have done a great job when they're out there. Members of the community have alerted us to it, thankfully, in the way that they can. And our park staff or our road crew or whoever is on the ground immediately doing everything they can to get rid of it. But I feel I need to call it out that this is a safe place. We want to build a safe, inclusive community. So I will be finding other ways to speak out against this. But these hate symbols that are spray painted or drawn, they have no place in our community. Nobody in Sooke likes to see that. And I think that's where it's sort of coming into our official community plan, because when I think out who is hurt by this, well, I find it offensive. It doesn't hurt me, maybe because I've dealt with racism my entire life, so I'm tolerating it. But what does that say to my son and other young children and minorities who are dealing with this day after day? These are victims here that don't have a voice, cannot speak out against it. So it's just wrong, and it needs to stop. So I thank members of the community for letting us know. But there's no place for hate in our community. We're in a tough time right now where COVID has sort of brought all the dirty laundry to the forefront, and we're finding ways to deal with it. But you see how hate is destroying a corner of the world, and people are fleeing right now. And I think we need to stand strong as a community here, and that those that are suffering maybe don't need to be the ones to speak out, but those of you that can, you need to call it out. So this is wrong, and create a safe place so that children feel free, and those, any minority in our town knows that they belong in this community. And in that way, I think it's through those calls. So that's a call to action, putting out to members of council and to members of the community that can. You need to stand strong in this time, because there are people there that can't. And for our staff, not putting up with it, but I won't talk about that anymore. I'm just kind of upset about it. Okay. So on that note, I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. And to everyone, I'll repeat the words of Bailey Henry. Be kind, be brave, be strong. All those in favor of adjournment? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight and for hanging through the whole meeting.